Isolde Viral was born in a house that didn't appear on any map. Perched between the cliffs of Valemore and the black pines of Salhurst, the Viral estate blinked in and out of existence, visible only to those who carried its blood. Locals claimed the place moved when it wanted, breathing like a beast. No one ever approached twice. The estate's servants were all cousins, and sisters, and brothers, all descended from one woman, Margessa Viral, who claimed she mated with the wind and bore 13 children with no known fathers. Every generation after her had bred inward, sealing the Viral line like a jar. Isolde was the last, the final heir to the flesh maze. Isolde had 2 different colored eyes, one silver, one milk white. She could taste names. When someone said sunlight, she felt honey coat her teeth. Words made her bleed from her ears if they came from strangers. Her body didn't break. It remembered, and healed wrong. On her 21st birthday, the house locked its doors and whispered, "You are ready now." A staircase appeared behind the fireplace. It hadn't existed the night before. At the bottom, she found a garden, made entirely of glass. The glass garden shimmered under an eternal twilight, even though it was underground. Every petal was translucent, yet alive, shivering when she passed. Isolde reached out to touch a glass lily and gasped. It whispered a name she had never heard before. Elbethra. The moment the name hit her lips, she felt it melt down her throat like molten sugar. Her jaw locked. Her eyes rolled back. And then, she knew Elbethra. A girl who lived in 1420, born in the same house. A cousin. A sister. A twin. And Elbethra had murdered her own son in that very garden. Isolde vomited blood and feathers. When she looked in the mirror afterward, her reflection smiled with 2 mouths. One hers, one belonging to someone long dead. That night, she carved names into her walls, unable to stop. Each name unlocked a scream, a memory, a buried life. The next morning, every mirror in the house cracked in the exact same pattern, a spiral. Her voice, when she tried to speak, echoed in 3 different languages. And someone else whispered with her, always a second behind, like an echo or a twin born in thought. At the heart of the house, behind a false wall in the nursery, Isolde discovered a door that opened only when she said the names backward. Elbethra became Artable, and the lock melted like wax. Inside was a room shaped like a spiral, with no corners, only curve after curve of velvet red walls and bone-white furniture. On the floor was a map, not of countries, but of bloodlines, threaded together like tangled veins. Each name was stitched in hair. Isolde saw her name at the center, but it kept shifting. Sometimes it read Isolde. Sometimes it read Mother. Once, it read Grief. Paintings on the walls showed versions of her. In one, she held a crown. In another, she burned at the stake while smiling. In the last, she knelt over a cradle filled with worms. Beneath each portrait, the same carved message. The fruit does not rot, it returns. She stepped into the spiral, and the walls whispered in tongues she hadn't learned. Her left eye began to ache, and when she blinked, she saw a tower in the desert. A place she had never been. But something inside her recognized it. At night, the vision came back. The tower stood alone, surrounded by scorched sand and whispering winds. Isolde dreamed of walking barefoot across it. Her feet bled, but she didn't stop. A door at the tower's base opened for her like a mouth. Inside, 13 staircases spiraled in different directions. Each led to a different version of her life, some forgotten, some not yet lived. In one, she saw herself raising a child with no face. In another, she ruled a court of corpses who wept flowers. In the final vision, she sat in the glass garden, old, blind, still whispering names. She woke with sand in her mouth, real sand, and a word carved into her skin, bride. She scratched it until it bled. But by morning, the wound had healed and the word was now on her mirror. It shimmered with heat. The house rang its bells, bells that had not chimed since her great-grandmother died. The servants, faceless and silent, laid out a dress stitched from eyelid skin and rose petals. It was time, they said. The bloodline must loop again. She was to be wed. The guests arrived in silence. Each wore a mask carved from driftwood. Some masks wept, others grinned with too many teeth. They filled the black chapel at the estate's western wing, a wing Isolde didn't know existed until that morning. She walked the aisle barefoot, the petals beneath her turning to glass. At the altar stood no man, just a mirror, a full-length obsidian glass that reflected her only sometimes. When it did, she wore different clothes. Sometimes she was pregnant, sometimes crowned, sometimes skeletal, always alone. Behind her, the masked guests began humming in low, bone-rattling tones. Isolde reached out and touched the mirror. It rippled, warm as skin. The chapel shook. Blood poured from the candles. A priest, if you could call the stitched thing that, opened its book and read from a language that sounded like glass shattering underwater. Then came the vows. She didn't speak them. The mirror did. It promised to continue, to consume, to restore the pattern. And when it said, "I do," her womb burned like it had remembered something ancient and monstrous. The guests clapped with insect wings. That night, Isolde woke in her bed, sweating salt instead of water. Her stomach pulsed with heat. Her skin looked transparent in candlelight. She could see her organs, but they weren't hers. Her womb looked like it belonged to something with gills. In the hallway, a trail of tiny, wet footprints led from her room to the library. She followed them barefoot. The books there had grown teeth. One opened on its own, gasping like lungs, and inside was a drawing of her face split in half. One human, one something else. Inside the drawing, a tiny seed pulsed. Her name was written beside it, followed by the word, Iteration 52. She touched the page and flinched. Her womb contracted violently. It was not pregnancy. It was recursion. She was carrying the family line backward. She would give birth to the first virile. The house began to hum, low and constant. It was preparing. She could feel the glass garden blooming again. The spiral map in the nursery shifted once more. Her name vanished, replaced by Origin. Over the next 13 nights, Isolde didn't sleep. Not truly. Each night, a new name would flood her mind at exactly 3:13 a.m., and her body would burn with fever. The servants brought her ice that steamed on her skin. Each time she whispered a name, her body aged a decade, then reversed by dawn. She started writing the names in blood on the nursery walls. They pulsed faintly, like worms. The names were old, predating language, names that made her teeth loosen and her spine bend. One night, she whispered a name and the entire west wing of the house collapsed. She realized the names were keys. Each one opened part of her memory that wasn't hers. She remembered being hung from a tree for witchcraft in 1511. She remembered birthing twins that never stopped screaming. She remembered burying herself alive. By the 13th night, she had filled every mirror in the house with names. The reflections now bowed when she entered a room. One of them, the reflection in the spiral room, started moving before she did. And it smiled. The pregnancy came fast. Her belly swelled in one day. Her navel split like an eyelid, revealing a black orb beneath the skin. It whispered. It had opinions. It asked her riddles in languages that gave her migraines. What dies but never lived? It asked. She answered, you, and felt it twist inside her. That night, her dreams took her back to the glass garden. But this time, the flowers were rotting, crying, pleading. They called her mother and begged her not to finish the ritual. On the 14th day, she gave birth in silence. No blood, no midwife, just her and the spiral. What came out wasn't a child, but a mirror shard shaped like a heart. She screamed until the walls cracked. The servants gathered the shard and placed it on a throne of teeth. This is your heir, the priest thing said. This is your beginning. Isolde touched the shard, and it pulsed. Inside it, she saw all the virals before her. And then, herself again, birthing herself, endlessly, forever. The bloodline wasn't a line. It was a circle. The house began to shift. Floors folded into ceilings. Doors grew teeth. The spiral room began turning on its own, like a giant eye rolling in its socket. The mirrors shattered but did not fall. They hovered, spinning around her, showing her futures she could not refuse. The servants began to rot standing up. Their flesh peeled back to reveal porcelain underneath. They had never been people, only echoes. Vessels for the names. They bowed to her and fell apart. She felt no grief, only inevitability. Her arms elongated. Her voice developed an echo. She no longer needed to eat or sleep. She only whispered names into the soil, and glass flowers bloomed from the blood. The house fed on her, but she fed it back, loop for loop. In the grand mirror hall, She saw it clearly now. There was no first virile, no founder. She was the founder and the last and the future, all at once. The bloodline had no origin because it was a closed loop, a glitch in time, a womb that birthed only itself. Centuries passed, though the moon never moved. Isolde no longer needed a name. She simply was. The garden covered the estate now, glass vines wrapping around towers and skeletons. Travelers sometimes glimpsed it in their sleep and woke weeping. Sometimes, one found their way to the house. A wanderer, a scholar, a madwoman. They always said the same thing. I feel like I've been here before. And they had. Because to dream of Isolde was to belong to her. To carry a sliver of her seed. The house always welcomed them. It whispered their names until they forgot who they were. Then, it asked one question. Would you like to see the garden? Few ever said no. None ever left. And deep beneath the spiral, in the womb of the house, Isolde rocks the glass shard on her lap. Her skin is translucent now. Her eyes are both silver. She hums a lullaby with no melody. A name is forming on her tongue. Maybe yours.